My name is Boyd Garner, and at 58 years old, my two kids scheduled a FaceTime call to tell me I was calling too much. That sentence still sounds strange when I say it out loud. My son, my daughter. They compared calendars across two time zones, something they hadn't managed to do in years, and they found a Tuesday afternoon that worked for both of them, and they sat down in front of their respective cameras and told their father, together, with the kind of measured kindness that is somehow worse than anger, that the calls needed to stop. My son Griffin is 51. He sells commercial real estate in Nashville. He has a voice that sounds reasonable, even when what he's saying is not. My daughter Holly is 48. She runs a middle school up in Clarksville. She has my wife Cora's way of folding her hands in her lap when she's already decided something and doesn't want it to look that way. I was sitting in my kitchen in Harlan County, Kentucky, when the call came through. The kitchen that Cora and I put in ourselves in 1998. The countertops aren't level. I've known that for 26 years. Never fixed them because Cora used to say she liked a surface with a little lean to it. Kept things from getting too comfortable. Griffin spoke first. He always does. Dad, we've been talking, and we think the number of times you're calling is getting to be a lot. I'm in the middle of deals most mornings. Holly's got a whole school to run. Holly nodded on her half of the screen. You know we love you, Daddy. It's just a pause. It's just a lot. I asked what a lot meant. Griffin said 3 or 4 times a week. I said I had counted twice a week, not 3 or 4. He said it felt like more. I said feelings and arithmetic weren't the same thing. Holly did the thing with her hands. I want you to know something I told myself right there in that kitchen, while the call was still going. I did not get angry. I sat there the way you sit in a waiting room, when you already know what the doctor is going to say. Not surprised, just tired of having been right all along. I said okay, I said I understood, I said I'd give them space. 2 words that do a lot of heavy lifting. What they didn't know, and what I didn't say, was what a man does with all that quiet. Before I go any further, do me a favor and hit like and subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Now let me take you back to that Tuesday. Cora died 4 years ago in March, ovarian cancer. She lasted 14 months after the diagnosis, which the doctors said was longer than expected, and which Cora said was exactly as long as she planned to last. She was like that, deliberate. She died in the bedroom we'd shared for 31 years with the window cracked because she wanted to hear the road. After she was gone, I retired from 28 years as a licensed electrician. I had the knees for maybe 3 more years on ladders and rooftops, and I chose not to use them. I've got 35 acres out past the county line. Been in my family since my father bought it in 1963 for almost nothing, because nobody wanted land that far back from the highway. Turns out when natural gas companies start looking for leasing rights, far from the highway stops being a problem. I called my kids because quiet makes me nervous. That's the honest truth of it. The house had been full for 30 years. Cora Griffin, when he was small, Holly's friends in and out, my younger brother Lee over on weekends to watch the game. Then one by one each of those sounds left. Lee died 3 years ago on a February morning on Route 421 when a pickup crossed the center line. Griffin moved to Nashville in 2004. Holly 20 minutes north in 2009, and then Cora. So yes, I called Griffin when I read something in the paper I thought he'd find interesting. I called Holly to hear about her week. I called because the alternative was sitting in a kitchen with unlevel countertops and nowhere for the sound to land, and at 58 that particular road has a direction I did not want to start walking. But I stopped. I did exactly what they asked me to do. That first week I didn't call either of them once. I told myself it was reasonable. Griffin is a busy man. Deals, commissions, clients who phone at 7 in the morning. Holly runs a school of 600 kids and goes in at 6:30 and doesn't leave until the last bus clears the lot. These are real things, real pressures. I did not want to be one more thing pushing down on people I loved. I want to be honest with you about something. Making excuses for them had become a habit so old I didn't notice I was doing it anymore. I'd been doing it since Cora's funeral, when Griffin flew in for 48 hours and flew back out, and Holly organized the reception at the church hall, and then got very busy with the start of the school year. I told myself, they showed up. That counts. I kept telling myself that while I sat in a house that had stopped making noise, The only thing that broke the silence was the same thing that had been breaking it every Tuesday night at 9 o'clock for 2 years. My nephew Evan. Evan is 26. He is Lee's boy. His mother left when Evan was 16 and headed to Lexington, so when Lee's truck got hit on Route 421, Evan went from having one parent to having none in about 45 minutes. He was 23 years old. What my son and daughter sent when Lee died was a plant, a ficus. It arrived 2 days after the funeral in a wicker basket with a Hallmark card, which meant Evan was sitting alone in his father's apartment with a ficus when it got there. I know because I was there. I drove the 4 hours to Corbin and stayed a week and helped him sort through Lee's things, and drove back with Lee's dog, because Evan's building didn't allow pets. Lee's dog is named Sergeant, and he is 11 years old, and he sleeps on Cora's side of the bed, and I have never once tried to move him. Evan calls every Tuesday at 9. He does HVAC work, learned it from his father, and he drives a service van with 180,000 miles on it, and he calls from the parking lot of wherever his last job of the day was. He doesn't call about anything, he just calls, "Hey Uncle Boyd. Bad one today. Guy hadn't changed his filter in 3 years. I found a bird nest in the return duct." And that's 20 minutes right there. That's the whole call sometimes. A bird nest. Then I love you and drive safe and gone. After 11 days of silence from my son and my daughter, Evan was the only person who had called. Not Griffin, not Holly, Evan. I did the arithmetic while he was talking about that bird nest. The arithmetic was not kind. That Tuesday he got quiet in a way I recognized. It's the sound of a young person deciding whether to be a weight. "You can just say it," I told him. The wrongful death settlement from his father's accident, not a large amount, but something, had been listed as income when his financial aid package got recalculated for his night school program. An engineering degree, 2 nights a week, community college in Corbin. The settlement bumped him into a different bracket. His aid got cut. "How much short?" I asked. "It's not a big deal, Uncle Boyd." "How much?" $9,400. He said it like an apology. For next year, I was thinking about taking a leave of absence, picking up a second route. I know what a leave of absence from a night school program looks like at 26. It looks like a man who drives a service van for the next 30 years and never gets to put those letters after his name that he'd been working toward. "Don't do anything yet," I said. "Uncle Boyd, don't sign anything. Give me 2 weeks. A pause. "Okay," he said, "okay." We hung up. I sat in the kitchen with the light off and thought about Lee, who had called me every day for 15 years, usually from the cab of his truck. And I thought about the plant my kids sent. And I thought about the fact that Evan had not once in 2 years of Tuesday calls ever asked me for a single thing. The next morning I called Lyle Benson. Lyle's been my attorney since 1997. He works out of an office above the insurance agency on Main, and has never once in 27 years made me feel like I was wasting his time. I told him I was there about my homeowner's policy. He dealt with it in 6 minutes. Then he leaned back and looked at me the way a man looks at a circuit panel he suspects has been miswired for years. "You're not here about the homeowner's policy," he said. I didn't answer. He got my file from 2007. Read through it without making me feel watched. When he was done, he set it flat on the desk. "The trust you set up after Cora passed. Everything goes to Griffin and Holly, equal shares. No provisions for Lee's issue, because Lee was still alive when you wrote it." "He was alive when I wrote it," I said. Lyle nodded slowly. "A revocable trust is exactly what it sounds like. It can be amended on a Tuesday morning without notifying a soul, as long as you're competent." He let that sit. "It's the most ordinary instrument in estate planning. People set them up once and never touch them. They treat them like stone when they were meant to be." He wasn't suggesting anything, he was defining a word. I drove home and let that definition sit with me for 5 weeks. Then came my birthday. I turned 58 on April 4th. I didn't announce it. Not a milestone year. But Griffin and Holly have known the date for their entire lives. At 9:17 in the morning, Griffin sent a text. "Happy birthday, old man. Crazy week. Catch up soon." He did not catch up, he did not call. At 2:30, Holly sent a voice memo, 43 seconds. She sang the first line of Happy Birthday a little flat, said she loved me, said she was slammed, but would call that weekend. She did not call that weekend. Those were my presents from the 2 children I raised. A text and 43 seconds of off-key singing. I made a grilled cheese for dinner and ate it standing at the counter, because the table seats 6, and setting one's place at it some nights is louder than anything in the room. At 5:45, headlights came up the driveway. Evan got out of the van holding a cardboard box flat with both hands. He had driven 4 hours. He had a morning shift the next day at 6. He'd made a cake in the break room at the HVAC supply warehouse, using a mug cake kit and a borrowed ramekin, and it had come out the shape and density of a hockey puck. He put a birthday candle in it. The candle was a number 3 because it was the only candle they had. "So you're turning 3, he said at the door. I couldn't speak for a moment. He'd also brought a rotisserie chicken and a bag of rolls from the gas station because he said he figured I probably hadn't made anything real for dinner. He was right. We sat at the kitchen table and ate rotisserie chicken, and he told me about a customer whose furnace had been installed backward in 1987 and had been running backward for 37 years and still worked, which he said was either an engineering miracle or proof that the universe has a sense of humor. He did not mention the $9,400. Not one time. I noticed that he didn't. I noticed how hard he was working not to. He left at 9 to drive back. I stood in the driveway until his taillights turned at the end of the road. Then I went inside and sat at the kitchen table and got out the legal pad I keep in the drawer where Cora used to keep her grocery lists. I drew 2 columns. Left side, every time in 3 years that Griffin or Holly had shown up or called for any reason that wasn't logistics. Not texts. Not voice memos sent while doing something else. Actual contact that was about me. Left column, 7 entries. 1 was Lee's funeral, 2 were Christmas. I sat there and made sure I was being fair. I was being fair. Right column, Evan, every Tuesday for 2 years, 52 Tuesdays a year. I stopped counting when I hit 80 because I ran out of patience for the arithmetic. I looked at those 2 columns for a long time in a quiet kitchen in Harlan County, and I asked myself the question a man has to ask himself at this point. Are you doing this because you're hurt? Yes, partly. I am not going to pretend otherwise. When your children compare schedules and pick a time to tell you that you're too much, that lands somewhere specific and it does not leave quickly. But I asked myself a second question. If Cora walked in right now and I showed her this legal pad, what would she say? I knew exactly what she'd say. She'd tilt her head about 2 degrees to the left the way she always did, and she'd say, Boyd, why does the paper say something that isn't true anymore? Not punish them, not hurt them back, just the paper is wrong, fix the paper. I called Lyle the next morning and asked for an hour. But before I signed anything, I gave them a door. I want that on record because it matters to me. 2 months of silence and I broke it myself. Griffin picked up on the 3rd ring. Airport sounds behind him. I'd like to take you to lunch, I said. Any day this week. Is everything okay? He asked. Does something have to be wrong? He said he'd look at his schedule and text me. He did not text me. A week later, I called Holly. She said, that's so sweet, Daddy, and she was completely slammed right now, and she'd call me Sunday to pick a time. She did not call Sunday. I want you to understand what I'm telling you. I did not ask them for help. I did not ask them for money. I asked my 2 children who live 45 and 38 minutes from my front door to sit in a diner with me for an hour. I asked twice, then a 3rd time, and Griffin said the sentence I will hear until I am dead. Can't this wait, Dad? I'm slammed. Can't this wait? I said sure it can. I hung up. I looked at the legal pad. I drew a line through the last item written on it. The last item was the word maybe. Monday I drove to Lyle's office with a folder under my arm. Lyle did not make it feel like anything other than paperwork, which is what you pay a lawyer for. He went through it carefully, the way an inspector goes through wiring. What you have is a revocable living trust, he said. Everything you own, the house, the acreage, the accounts, sits inside it. Because it's revocable, you can amend the distribution schedule right now today without notifying a soul as long as you have capacity. That is not a trick. That is the design of the instrument. People set these up once and treat them like they're carved into something. They're not. When you die, there's no probate, no courtroom, no year-long process. Your successor trustee distributes according to the schedule, quietly and quickly. He set his pen down. Here's what I need you to hear. If you amend this and say nothing, they find out the worst possible way. In a room from a stranger after you're gone and can't be held accountable. That's a cruelty, Boyd. I've watched it unmake families. Then don't let it be a stranger, I said. I want to be in the room while I'm still alive to answer for it. He was quiet a moment. That is the harder thing, he said. I know it is. We worked for 2 hours, no conditions, no traps, no punishment clauses. I told him I wanted a document so ordinary that any fair person would read it and find nothing strange. Just a schedule, just the truth in percentages. Evan gets the property, the house, the 35 acres on County Road 7. The accounts split equally, dollar for dollar, between Griffin and Holly. They would each receive real money, roughly a fifth of what they had been expecting, roughly a fifth of what Griffin had been making very quiet plans around. I'm not punishing anyone, Lyle, I said. I'm just being accurate on paper. He looked at me over his glasses. In my experience, those tend to feel the same to the people being corrected, he said. 2 weeks after I left Lyle's office, my phone rang on a Thursday evening. Griffin. Griffin never calls. Hey, Dad, how you doing? Fine, I said. Good. So hey, weird thing, ran into Dennis McAdams at a chamber event, and he mentioned seeing your truck outside Lyle Benson's a couple weeks back. There it was. Dennis McAdams should keep his eyes on the road, I said. Griffin laughed. It was a laugh with something attached to it. Yeah. No. Totally. Just wanted to make sure everything's okay on the health side. My health is fine, I said. Good. So is it just routine paperwork? Because if there's anything structural with the estate, Holly and I should probably be... That's my business, Griffin. The warmth left his voice like a switch. Dad, you're not doing anything drastic without looping us in first, right? I asked you to lunch 3 times, I said. The answer was can't this wait, so I stopped waiting. I hung up on my son for the first time in his adult life. Sat there with the phone warm in my hand. He'd called me. After 2 months of nothing, he'd finally found the time. It took word of a truck parked on Main to do it. 2 days later, Holly's car was in my driveway for the first time in over a year. She came in with a casserole dish and a smile she had clearly practiced during the drive. Daddy. She hugged me. She smelled like a department store. She looked around the kitchen the way an appraiser looks at a kitchen she's been asked to assess. Is that a new? Did you repaint in here? I repainted in 2021, I said. Sit down, Holly. She sat. She told me Griffin was worried, that they both were. She said people take advantage of men who live alone. She reached over and put her hand on mine. And then she said it. She said, Evan calls you so much, Daddy. He's young, he's got needs. And you're a generous person, and I just don't want someone putting ideas in your head. I looked at my daughter for a long moment. When did you last speak to Evan? I asked. Her face did something small. His father's funeral, I said, 3 years ago. When you sent the plant. She pulled her hand back. I understood something sitting at that table. They were not afraid of losing me. I had been fading from their lives for years, and it had cost them a text, a 43-second voice memo, and a casserole dish. What they were afraid of was losing their share of something. That is a different fear. It lives in a different part of a person. Thank you for bringing dinner, I said, and I stood up. She left angry. She called Griffin before she'd even cleared the driveway. I saw her through the window, phone to her ear, and the word she used, I found out later, was that I wasn't myself, that I wasn't acting like myself. That word. I didn't sleep for 3 nights. Because I know what that word becomes when the right people say it enough times. It stops being an observation. It starts being a document. Here is the part I am not proud of. I almost quit. Because there is a voice that comes at 3 in the morning when you are 58 and the house is quiet and it sounds exactly like your own father. And it says, you are a bitter man rewriting his will because his feelings got hurt on a phone call. You raised them. Whatever they became, you had a hand in building. That last part nearly finished me, because there's truth in it. I worked Saturdays when Griffin and Holly were teenagers. I'm an electrician. When the work is there, you go. When Cora got sick, I didn't know how to be present in a room with something I couldn't fix. I rewired the garage. I replaced every outlet in the house. I found problems I could solve, because cancer is not a problem you can solve, and I am a man who solves problems. And I did not know what to do with something that defeated me. Griffin was in his mid-40s, managing his mother's doctor appointments because his father was in the garage with a wire stripper. So am I to grade anybody on showing up? I sat with Sargent in the dark kitchen at 3 in the morning, and I said out loud, "Am I being cruel?" "He's a dog." He didn't answer. The next Tuesday, Evan called. He could hear it in me before I said anything. "You doing okay, Uncle Boyd?" "Do you think I'm a hard man?" I asked. A long pause. "Dad used to say you didn't do fair," he said finally. "He said you did accurate. Said most people think those are the same thing, but they're not." I put my hand over my eyes. "He said you were the only one who'd ever told him something was wrong when it was wrong, even when it would have been easier not to. He always said that about you. He said you were straight." There it was. My dead brother's voice coming back to me through his son in a parking lot somewhere at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. I called Lyle Monday morning and told him to finish it. In small counties, nothing stays private. Gary Loomis has lived across the road from me since 2002. He plows my driveway every December, and we have never once discussed it because discussing it would require him to stop. One morning in late March, we were both out getting our mail at the same time. "Haven't seen your son's car around much," he said, not looking up. "He's busy," I said. Gary looked at his mailbox for about 4 seconds. He said, and went inside. That is a full paragraph in Harlan County. At First Baptist, a woman named Dolores Fitch started leaving a seat for me at the end of her pew. Nobody asked her to. She just started putting her hymnal on the cushion beside her, and picking it up when I came in. She's been doing it for months. We have never said a word about it. The diner on Collins started giving me the corner booth. It fits 4. I go alone. Vera, who has refilled my coffee for 15 years, has never once asked where my children are. But when Holly came through town in February and stopped in for lunch, Vera took her order and brought her food and did not ask how her father was doing. Holly told Griffin afterward that people were being strange. They weren't being strange, they were keeping a ledger. That's what small communities do. They don't confront you, they don't announce it. They just quietly move the hymnal, and they wait. And some say when something happens, every single one of them is standing right there in the room with you. March 17th, Lyle's office. 2 witnesses, a notary named Winifred, who has processed more of these than she can count. Lyle went through each question the way an inspector checks a load-bearing wall. State your full legal name. Boyd Allen Garner. Do you understand that you are amending the distribution schedule of your revocable living trust? I do. Is anyone inside or outside this room applying pressure to this decision? No. Has your nephew Evan been made aware of this amendment? He has not. Has he requested any portion of your estate in any form? He has never asked me for $1 in his life. Lyle looked at the witnesses. What they saw was a 58-year-old retired electrician in his good flannel, answering in complete sentences, no one's hands on him. Then he read the schedule. The real property, the house and the 35 acres on County Road 7, held in trust for Evan, conveyed outright at age 30. The savings, an education fund drawn first, dispersed directly to his institution. The remainder split equally, share and share alike, between Griffin and Holly. Equal, to the dollar. I did not rank my children against each other. I just declined to pretend the ledger said something it didn't say. What they would each receive was real money, roughly a fifth of what they had been quietly planning around. No conditions in the document, no traps, no clever provisions, just a schedule, just the truth written down. I signed. Winifred stamped it. Then I told Lyle what I had decided from the beginning. I want them in the room, I said. While I'm alive and in it, I'm not going to be a coward and let them find out when I'm in the ground. He studied me for a long moment. They will not forgive you for that, he said. They won't forgive the paper either, I said. At least this way they have to look at me. 3 weeks later, I slipped on the back porch in a frost we weren't expecting in late March. Nothing dramatic. Sprained my wrist, hit my head on the railing. They kept me overnight at ARH Regional for observation, because at 58 that's the protocol. Evan got there in 3 hours and 40 minutes. He had a job at 6 the next morning. He sat in the chair beside my bed with a paperback and didn't mention the job, and I only found out 3 days later from his roommate that he'd had to call in and lose a day's pay. Griffin arrived the following afternoon. Holly came 30 minutes after that. They came into the room and I watched them with the focus you use when you're tracing a fault you know is there. Griffin stood at the foot of the bed. He asked how I was. He listened for about 10 seconds. Then he stepped into the hall and through a door that does not close. All the way I heard my son ask the floor nurse whether there had been any changes to my cognition, whether there was documentation, whether anything had been noted on the chart. Not, is he going to be all right? Is there documentation? Holly came to the bed and held my hand and asked me twice, gently, whether I'd been feeling confused lately. Evan sat in the corner and got very small and very quiet. From the hospital bed I called Lyle. Send the letters, I said. Schedule the meeting. Now while there's a doctor who will put in writing that I am sharp. The letters went out 2 days later on plain stationery. Boyd Allen Garner, Revocable Trust, Distribution Review. Your attendance is requested. April 11th, 10 a.m. That's all a letter like that ever needs to say. Because to someone who has been counting on something, a letter like that sounds like finally. Griffin called me twice in the next 6 days. Twice. Suddenly I was extremely easy to reach. Dad, hey, so this meeting, is this you getting things in order? Something like that. Right. I've been thinking, and honestly the land especially, there's really only one practical approach with mineral rights on that acreage. I said I'd see him on the 11th. Evan called that Sunday confused, holding his own envelope. Uncle Boyd, why am I being invited to this? Because you're family, I said. But Griffin's going to be there, Holly. I don't want them thinking I asked for. Uncle Boyd, I know that. Come to the meeting. April 11th, 9:55 a.m. Every one of them parked on Main Street in a county that keeps a ledger. Griffin came up the stairs in a blazer, with a notebook under his arm. He brought a notebook. I will be thinking about that notebook for the rest of my life, because he brought it to take notes. Holly came in with her purse in her lap, and a smile like she was attending a difficult parent conference, whose outcome she had already determined. Evan came in wearing a button-down I had never seen before. I think he bought it for this occasion. I had to look at the window for a moment. Lyle's conference room has a round oak table, 8 chairs, a window that in April morning light lands a bright patch right across the middle of the table like something spilled, a wall clock that ticks loud enough to register. Griffin took the chair across from me, not beside me, squared his notebook and clicked his pen. Holly sat with her purse in her lap and her ankles crossed. Evan took the seat nearest the door. Lyle came in with a single blue folder, sat down, did not open it. Thank you all for coming. Of course, Griffin said, warm as a car salesman. Dad, this is really responsible of you. Holly, so brave, Daddy, like I was agreeing to a medical procedure. Before we begin, Lyle said, I want to note for the record that Mr. Garner underwent a full cognitive evaluation on March 31st, at his own request. Griffin raised a hand, still smiling. Do we really need all the formalities? It's family. The clock ticked. We need all of it, Lyle said. Something moved across my son's face then. A small shift. He looked at me, really looked for the first time in years. Whatever he was trying to read, he couldn't find it. Let's just get through the paperwork, he said, and clicked his pen again. Lyle opened the folder. The trust was amended on March 17th, he said. The pen stopped. Amended, Griffin said. Amended, executed, and notarized. I'll read the distribution schedule now. Wait. To Evan Lee Garner, the residence at 14 County Road 7, together with the 35-acre parcel, held in trust and conveyed outright at age 30. Holly made a sound, not a word, a sound. To Evan Lee Garner, an education fund in the amount listed in Schedule B, disbursed directly to the institution of enrollment. Evan had gone completely white. He was shaking his head, both hands flat on the table, leaning toward me. Uncle Boyd. No. Uncle Boyd, no. To Griffin James Garner and Holly Ann Garner Miles, the residuary balance, divided equally, share and share alike. Lyle stopped. The room held very still. Griffin did the math. I watched him do it. I watched my 51-year-old son sit at that oak table in the April light and calculate in about 3 seconds that the number he had been quietly building his expectations around had just become a fraction of itself. That can't be right, Holly said, her voice breaking. Daddy, the house, Mom's. I was there, I said. Evan was on his feet. He pressed his hands to his face. Uncle Boyd, I don't want this. This isn't why I called you. You know that. Tell me you know that. I know that. Then take it back. No, I said. He stared at me. Sit down, Evan, please. He sat down. He was trembling. You just told a room full of people you don't want it, I said, in front of a lawyer, on the record. Do you understand what you just did? He shook his head. You proved that I was right. Every Tuesday, for 2 years, you called a man you thought had nothing to leave you. And the minute you found out otherwise, your first move was to hand it back. I looked down the table. That is what I am leaving it to. Holly had gone completely still. Griffin had his hand over his mouth, and he was staring at his cousin as if he had never actually seen him before in his life. Which I suppose he hadn't. Lyle slid a single page from the folder. Mr. Garner was evaluated by Dr. Francis Alcott on March 31st. Full cognitive workup. He scored at the 92nd percentile for his age cohort. He set it down. This amendment was executed on March 17th. That is 10 days before Mr. Garner's fall. I draw your attention to the sequence. Griffin's hand came away from his mouth. There is a 27-year continuous attorney-client relationship on file, Lyle continued. 2 disinterested witnesses, a notary. He answered competency questions on the record unprompted. I am noting all of this because in my experience, this is the moment where someone says the word contest. So let me save you the retainer fee. There is no undue influence. The beneficiary did not know this was happening. There is no incapacity. The neurologist beat you to that argument by 2 weeks. And there is no clause in this document that any reasonable person would find unusual. Because your father specifically instructed me not to write one. He folded his hands. It is frankly boring. It is also airtight. The room was completely silent. The clock ticked. Somewhere outside someone was loading something onto a truck. Griffin stood up, slowly this time. He picked up the notebook he had brought to take notes in. He looked at me. This is because of the phone calls, he said. Very quiet, almost nothing. It's because of the columns, I said. He didn't understand that. I didn't explain it. He walked out, the door closed behind him. The clock kept ticking the way it does. Nobody won anything that day. I want you to hear me say that. I drove home alone and sat in my truck in the driveway for 25 minutes before I could make myself go inside. When I did, I sat on the couch in my good flannel and I put my face in my hands. You do not get to feel like you won when you have just broken your son in a lawyer's conference room. 6 weeks of silence from Griffin. Holly sent a long text on day 11. She said I had always favored Lee's side of the family over my own. She said Cora would be ashamed. She said I was a man who measured love the way I measured wire, in lengths and cuts, and that I would rather be right than have a family. That one landed. I'm not going to pretend it didn't. I typed 7 different responses. I deleted everyone. What I finally sent was this: Holly, I love you. That has never once been in question. The door here is open every Sunday at 6. I'll be here, Dad. She didn't answer, but she didn't block me either. Gary Loomis came over in May to check my gutters, which did not need checking. Heard there was some business, he said, up on the ladder. There was some, I said. He worked without talking for a while. That boy drives a long way every week, he said. He does, I said. Gary came down off the ladder and looked at the house for a moment. House is solid, he said. Then he picked up his level and went home. That is a eulogy in Harlan County. Then on a Wednesday evening in late July, a truck I recognized came up my driveway. Griffin got out alone. He stood on the porch for a long time before he knocked. I let him in, put coffee on because that's what my hands know how to do. We sat at the kitchen table. He looked at the countertops. Cora always said these weren't level, he said. They're not. I know. He turned his mug in his hands. There's a deal I personally guaranteed in 2021, he said. Commercial property down in Murfreesboro. The anchor tenant pulled out in January. The bank's been patient, but patient has a number on it. Plus the kids' tuition. Plus my mother-in-law's memory care. He shrugged in a way that had nothing easy in it. It's been bad, Dad, for a while now. I didn't say anything. You want to know why I told you to stop calling? He looked up. Because every time the phone rang, you wanted to hear about how things were going, and I couldn't tell you how things were going. He made a sound that wasn't a laugh. You worked 28 years and never missed a payment. You carried mom through cancer without flinching. You don't understand what it means to be broke and ashamed in front of your own father. So I told you to stop calling, so I didn't have to say the words out loud to you. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, something moved in the dark. I sat there and understood something 40 years too late. I had built a man who would rather be swallowed alive than say the word help to his father. I taught him that the long hours, the working Saturdays, the rewiring the garage when I should have been sitting at the kitchen table. I built that in him and nobody else did. Griffin, I said, I'm sorry. His eyes went red at the edges. He shook his head fast. That's not, Dad. I'm not here for that. I know you're not. I'm still sorry. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, exactly the way he did at 7 years old when I caught him in something, and he didn't want me to see it. We sat with it for a while. I'm not changing the trust, I said. I know, he said and nodded fast. I know. I'm not asking. You're always my son, always. But respect isn't something you inherit, it gets shown. He nodded again. Sunday, I said. 6 o'clock, that's when the phone rings here. He was quiet a moment. Okay, Dad, he said. Okay. He did not take the leave of absence. The education fund pays the school directly. Evan made Lyle put it in writing that no check would pass through his own hands, because that was the only way he'd agree to any part of it. He is halfway through his engineering degree now. He still calls every Tuesday at 9 from whatever parking lot he ends up in. Last week he called to tell me he'd found a squirrel that had somehow gotten into a ductwork system, and he was laughing so hard he could barely get the sentence out. And neither of us said anything about a truck on Route 421 on a February morning. We didn't have to. Some things get carried between people without anyone deciding to carry them. Holly hasn't called, not yet, but at Christmas she sent a card, inside in her own handwriting. I'm still angry, and I am still your daughter. I put that card on the mantle. It's still there. It is the truest thing she's written me in years, and I will take it. Griffin calls most Sundays now. Not everyone. He misses some. He's the same man with the same debt and the same tired voice. But he calls at 6, and he calls about nothing. Last week he told me his daughter got her learner's permit, and he sat in the passenger seat for 40 minutes with his hand on the door handle. He told me the office microwave died, and everyone took it personally. 11 minutes. About nothing. It was the best 11 minutes I have had since Cora was here. I'm on the porch tonight, second week of August. The evening is doing what Kentucky evenings do in August, which is sit on you like something that isn't leaving. My phone is on the table beside me. It is a Tuesday, and it is getting close to 9 o'clock, and in a few minutes it is going to ring. And it will be Evan, calling from a parking lot somewhere, about absolutely nothing at all. There is a difference between a quiet phone and an empty life. I spent a long time not knowing what that difference was. I spent 28 years being useful, wiring houses, pulling permits, keeping the lights on for people. And when I finally stopped being useful in the way I had always been useful, I found out what I was actually worth to the people I raised. That is a hard thing to discover at 58. It is also, I believe, the last honest thing anyone will ever give you freely. So if someone has told you that you're too much, too needy, calling too often, I want you to hear a retired electrician say this plainly. Your voice is not an inconvenience. You are allowed to stop explaining yourself to people who aren't listening. You are allowed to stop being the one who always reaches first. And you are allowed to let the paper finally say what is actually true. Hit like if this reached you tonight. Subscribe because there's more waiting. The next one is about the Sunday Holly finally picked up the phone. That story is harder, but I'll tell it. It's almost 9.